What's up, everybody? I hope you have an amazing day so far. My name is Phil, and today's video, I'm going to check out the ToneX Torpedo Reload 2 Reactive Load Box.
The ToneX Torpedo Reload 2 is a premium all-analog reactive load box designed for both studio and live use. Its Celestion-approved load response handles amplifiers up to 200 watts RMS with selectable 4, 8, or 16 ohm operation. With its continuous attenuation down to complete silence, dual 215 watt power amps, XLR line outputs, and a stereo effects loop, this unit provides serious routing flexibility for any situation you could imagine. Whether recording silently or driving cabinets on stage, the Reload 2 is a capable, thoughtfully designed centerpiece for any modern amp rig.
I want to give you a little bit of a backstory on to this unit over here and start with the fact that this is a sponsored review. I'm allowed to keep the Reload 2 in exchange for this video, so take everything which I say with a grain of salt. However, first off, I'm not going to do any post-processing on this video, and secondly, I will try to be as unbiased as possible because in the end, I think it's valuable feedback for you, the people who are watching this, as well as to the manufacturer in case I find anything which is not working to my expectations or which I think needs improvement. With that out of the way, a little bit of a backstory. I was using for the greater part of a few years the St. Rock React IR2, which is still a fantastic reactive load box. However, there's so much bells and whistles on the St. Rock React IR2 that I wanted to kind of go away from because it has all of this digital shebang, IR loader, delay, noise gauge, modulation stuff, and all of that stuff. I don't need that. I want just something which works very well as a reactive load box because all of that digital stuff I'm going to add anyways in my PC when I'm doing the recordings and playing around with the amplifiers via plugins. So that was one thing which kind of bothered me on the St. Rock React IR. Also the fact that the React IR2 only was capable of receiving an 8 ohm amplifier output, while this over here allows you to switch between 4, 8, and 16 ohms was very much kind of a, I wouldn't say a deal breaker because I still like the React IR2 and it's just sitting there on the couch, but that basically gave another point to the Reload 2. And the last thing is that the frequency response of the React IR2 is very mid-scooped. It sounds incredible if you're playing through a very aggressive amp like the PV5150 or an EVH5150. However, in the recent years, I came to love more and more Marshall type tones where the mids are super important for me to kind of preserve the original tone of the amplifier. And the React IR2 was altering that a little bit too much to my taste, so I was on the hunt for a new reactive load box anyways. Then I had the collaboration with ToneX on the Genome amp suite, and I thought to myself, hey, this would be a perfect opportunity to enrich the collaboration between ToneX and me, get a cool piece of equipment which I always wanted to check out. Then we went basically for that review in exchange for gear type of thing. But there are a few other bells and whistles which make this unit truly stand out. One thing is that it has a Celestion-approved reactive component, so the frequency response is approved by Celestion, and I think that kind of comes across when you're playing through that because the mids are being retained in such a nice way that it sounds very familiar to a mix between, I would say, a Vintage 30, Greenback, and T75. It also has a stereo power amp. You send in the amplifier into the reactive load box, and that then gets amplified through the power amp, but you also can use a loop in the back to just simply plug in your favorite modeler in there and then have that being sent through the power amp into the cabinet. So it's very versatile in that regard. It has different types of versatility compared to the React IR2, but some which I can use more in my current setup. So that's why I ultimately made the change to the Reload 2, and I could not be happier. let's walk quickly through the signal chain. I'm playing my Balaguer Espada 2024 limited edition over here with the Hypernova pickups. Fantastic guitar. That goes to my pedal chain over here. Currently, I don't have really anything engaged except for the ISP Decimator G String 2 as a noise suppressor. The reason why nothing of this is exchanged, because amp-wise, I'm running into the Splon Quick Rod, which sounds best in my opinion without any boost engaged. This amp sounds really good when you're cranking it up. So when it's super loud, that's when this amp really shines through. That then goes through the KHE switcher into the Reload 2 and in parallel through the power amp into the Marshall 1960 AV, which is mic'd up with a single SM57. You will also have a line out, which is going to my interface. One thing to note is that the power amp, which we're having over here, is Class D. So if you're searching for something like the Fryat Power Station, which has a tube-based power amp, then of course this doesn't have that, but it's also a little bit less expensive. This costs around about 1,000 euros, and that is a fair price given for all of the bells and whistles which you're getting. You have the amp level which you're setting up depending on the volume of the amp which you're setting. So I'm just going to go ahead and crank this over here down because this is the volume knob of the stereo power amplifier, and then you're going to hear everything through an impulse response from York Audio. And you can see over here that the green LED was lighting up when I was playing. When I'm cranking that down, and then you can see that it's on the blue. I have set things up so that at any times when I'm over here on the blue LED, that my audio interface is also not clipping there. And there's also kind of an indicator over here where this then turns orange, and I believe also sometimes red when you are clipping that one over here. But let's dial it back in so it goes into the green range. Furthermore, you have an impedance setup where you can read exactly from the front which impedance you have, which I find very handy. Now, let me just go ahead and dial up the volume of the Splon over here. So I'm going to substantially raise the volume of the Splon. You can see that it's going into the orange territory, so I have to dial back. And now you can actually hear that power amp saturation coming in on the Splon, which is quite interesting. I'm not that much of a fan of that type of tone, so I'm going to dial that back in. This is still incredibly loud, I'll tell you that. There will be a comparison video at some point in time where I'm going to check out the Reload against the St. Rock React IR. However, this is not for this video. I want to focus on the Reload 2 because this is a review and not a comparison. I want to then go over to the channel A and channel B source. You got two different channels which you can set up. This is basically the power amp section, or basically the line out section of this respective channel A and B, which you then in the back end can kind of fetch off and place into either the cabinet or your audio interface. So let's check out what we actually got over here. We got a volume knob. So this is basically the cab volume, which is then going to the cab. Sounds really good in my opinion. You got the mojo over here, which is kind of a loudness button from what I gather. So it does the same thing like the loudness button on your stereo setup, kind of thickens up the low end, it brings a little bit more sizzle in the top end. Next up, we got a depth and presence control over here down below. Let's check out that without the mojo. That can be very interesting for preamps which don't come with a presence and depth section in there, where you just want to kind of give it a little bit more of that amp-like feeling. And then over here, output, you're setting the output for the interface. I already set everything that it works out well, so we're not going to touch that really over here. In the back, you have all of that loop setup, which you can set up, which we're not going to dive into too much in this video. A little bit more playing before we're then going to move over to other amplifiers on this reload over here, just to kind of give you an overall impression on what the Reload 2 does, as well as some other scenarios in how you can use this actually. Let's dial a little bit more presence in there. So good, so good. Okay, let's play around with the mojo. I'm gonna go with a little bit of a different tone over here. I'm gonna set the third gear, roll back the gain, and crank the mids, and take a little bit more low end out. I have now changed the amplifier to the Marshall TSL 100, which is out of frame on the Crunch channel. That is then going, of course, into the Reload 2 over here. And I'm now setting up, again, the neutral positions. So presence and depth are turned off. The mojo is turned off. And this is what we're getting. Especially on the TSL, I really like to engage the Mud Killer because it sounds phenomenal. I'm gonna take out all of the reverb on this amplifier. So let's check it out. Now, I really like the tonal characteristics of the TSL, but what I actually want to also achieve is that I'm getting a little bit more oomph, and here's where the depth button, for example, comes into play. I can now actually use that to add something which the original amplifier would not have. Man, the Reload 2 brings a certain quality to the amplifiers where it smooths out a little bit in such a way that it is more fun to play through without any boosting or something. So that's really awesome. Of course, it will sound a little bit different than when you're running through the cabinet itself. What I found is that the mids are a little bit more pushy, a little bit more pronounced, and therefore you have the illusion that the top end is somehow kind of losing a little bit of that bite to it, but I think that that's just an illusion in that regard. It still sounds phenomenal in any situation which I can imagine of, and therefore this gets my full approval, man. I really like this thing. I really can't wait to integrate this properly into my setup over here. I mean, this looks beautiful on the side, this wooden panels, but I still want to have that rack integrated. So it definitely also comes with the rack mounts. So there's that. All right, let's move over to the next setup where we're going to run some preamps and some digital modelers into the power amp section. All right, let's get to the final segment of this video before we wrap up this video. And I'm checking out now the ToneX One Plus into the loop of channel A. So we're going right into the return input of channel A, and that's using channel A basically as a power amp and nothing else. When I'm now playing, you can see that amp in level is not reacting at all because simply there is no amp in input over here because we're going instead into the loop of channel A. So let's just play a little bit around with the settings which we got. This is a capture which is very, very tight and percussive, which is a mix of the Electric Eye Audio Mud Killer into the Marshall JVM 410H. So let's check that out. Already sounds fantastic from what I'm hearing over here. And now we can play a little bit around with the depth, presence, and the mojo. All right, let's wrap up this video with my final thoughts and conclusions on the Two Notes Torpedo Reload 2. And I have to be honest with you, I could not be happier with this kind of exchange going on, with this collaboration with Two Notes, because having this thing finally in my arsenal makes it all feel complete. So I have already done a little bit testing on capture comparisons, and all the captures which I made with the Reload 2 turned out to be more to my liking and more to my style than through the St. Rock React IR2. However, I do want to again stress it's not a quality thing. The React IR2 is a fantastic load box. It's just pure preference. But at this stage where I'm at this experience level, checking out different gear, it's all about preference. Because I have all the amps which I could ask for, basically. I can get so many tones out of this stuff, and now it's only the very fine tweaking over here. In regards of the attenuator setup, this is the ultimate thing for me. I hope that you people enjoyed the video out there. If you want to check out the Reload 2 for yourself, I'm going to put a link in the description down below. Want to thank 2Notes for sponsoring this video once again, and I hope that we can collaborate again in the future, because this was an absolute joy to make, and these are the easiest reviews to make. Stuff where everything is cool and you like every single bit of the unit. This was one of them. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you to 2Notes for sponsoring this video. Hope to see you in the next video. Until then, keep it metal.